Welcome back, everyone, to the Cancel for Maintenance podcast. If this is your first time joining us, we're a show that takes a behind-the-scenes look into the gritty, non-glamorous life of aircraft maintenance. We share some laughs, impart some wisdom, all in hopes of giving you that split seconds relief in your day that can hopefully prevent a mishap. I am your co-host, Six.
I'm MVP.
And our third host, Shoreline, is once again in the back, monitoring our audio, making sure our faces stay fit for radio. So a couple episodes ago, we talked about owner-produced parts. We talked about if access to manuals, like via subscriptions, is a safety issue. And when we came out with that episode, a question got posed to us by one of our best patrons, was the right to repair. And as of right now, we had to kind of do a little bit of digging on this because right to repair seems pretty vague and open. And there's currently a lot of advocacy about this. I think there's currently 3 states that have passed some kind of legislation that they're allowed to do certain things. So in summary, what a right to repair means is you own the thing, you have a right to fix it. Most of us, we kind of relate this to say your old 1970s era cars and stuff, there's not a whole lot to it. You can mess with it and you'll generally run fine to a certain extent, or
a little bit more mechanical than electrical based vehicles.
Right. And I think a lot of these right to repair stuff, it kind of goes along the line if something's of a certain age, then you're totally okay to mess with it. And we see a lot of this stuff nowadays in smaller equipment, say electronics, cell phones, certain types of headphones, things of that sort of a certain age. And we see this all the time. You go to a mall or something like that, it says, we fix it here, or fix your screen or something like that.
And right. Like they even sell phone repair kits, on Amazon or whatever that you can get for your own home use.
Right. And majority of the stuff, sometimes, depending on the age of the phone, if you take it to them, hey, can you guys fix my cracked iPhone? They'll say yeah, sure, I'll fix it, but it's probably costs more than the phone's worth. I've had that told to me before. So okay, whatever, I guess I'll just ride it till it dies kind of thing. And apparently, that legislation is really trying to pick up in terms of automotive vehicles, like cars and stuff, because there's a lot of at-home mechanics or independent car repair people who say the manufacturers of these automobiles are making it harder and harder for the OEM for cars to be able to, if you don't have a license or some type of certificate from this OEM, you're not allowed to dick with it. And they manufacture it in such a way that only someone who is trained specifically by them, using their manuals, using their tools, are able to even know how to mess with it. And in doing so, without that type of specific training, you'll most likely just grenade the thing or break it. And I can understand to a certain extent why they do that, right? Likewise, for you as an owner, why this would be a benefit for you to have. Now, the debate that MVP and I are going to have right now, we're kind of learning this as we're going, is it okay or should there be a right to repair for aircraft? All right.
Yeah, there's like anything, there's positives and negatives to each
right.
each side of the argument. A lot of the experimental realm, they kind of have the freedoms to do the right to repair just because they built the dang thing. What's the rule 6? If you built 50% or more of it, it's essentially you're the OEM,
yeah, I want to say that's it.
It's 6 aviation industries or whatever, at that point.
Right. And more or less what they would call that design authority, if I'm quoting this correctly. As MVP said, if it's over 50% or more, you made it to from scratch to more than 50%, and you're technically the design authority, and you can more or less dictate how that thing flies and whatnot. Now, this is not to say a home built kit where you made half of it yourself. We're talking you got on a blueprint, you drew it all out yourself, you made it to spec yourself, got all the authorizations and whatever have yous, and you made it. That's, I mean, for most part, that's pretty impressive. um, but as far as like, say you're an owner, you bought yourself an airplane. Congrats, you bought an airplane, and you've got a license to fly it, but you don't necessarily have a aircraft repairman's license or an A&P certificate. So, like, I get the question as I'm understanding it as of right now, for at least as right to repair is, you're the aircraft owner. What can you do to fix? And as it stands right now, with no right to the repair legislation or some type of regulation, uh, an airplane owner can do quite a bit of stuff. Now, this is all based on the FAA's regulation, where it talks about what owner is allowed to do. And there's about 31 items, I want to say, about 31 items that an airplane owner can do. Majority, if not all of it, falls under the preventative maintenance side of the house. And it, it it may sound like some repairs or whatnot are air quote preventative maintenance, but I mean the list is pretty extensive, but it's not. It's like run of the mill stuff, like remove, replace your tires, put air in your tires, check your oil levels, do a prop run, replace the
General servicing, corrosion prevention, several inspections, through flights, pre and post flights, maybe a weekly check or whatever the case may be. But I would say just general maintenance items
right.
is what would be allowed.
Right. And there's a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to, like, say, when avionics, right? As far as air quote preventative maintenance, and majority of that stuff is kind of drilled down to like updating your software. Like, say if you bought like something from a GPS manufacturer and they have this new software update or whatnot, they'll mail you a disc or you buy a disc or whatever the case may be. Then you pop it into your software loader and update your GPS. That's totally preventative maintenance. Now, what deviates from preventative maintenance from the general maintenance practices is when you have to do some type of mod or modification or repair. And usually these are the ones that kind of involve some type of post maintenance inspection. Like you had to change out the engine, you had to do a structural patch, right? Or like a lot of these older aircraft with canvas, like anything over a significant size patch, they would have to have some kind of repairman or A&P who's licensed to do this, do the repair and or inspection. So there's quite a bit of room as far as like what you as an owner can do versus what a A&P certified mechanic can do. And if it's one of those, like, it doesn't sound like something I can just do with the regular tools I have on hand, then that's more likely going to be something that infringes on that major repair or major modification realm. But the way, as we currently understand the right to repair, it more or less means like you have access to the tools and you have access to the manuals for you as an owner to be able to do the repair yourself, or you have the right to choose what technician you can go to. And this is where I kind of get a go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. So kind of touching on that a little bit. Okay, you're an owner, so you can do these things. However, let's say you're a certified, EASA technician or FAA technician or whatever else, an A&P. Uh, can you do more? Is the stipulations or the restrictions loosened? So, hey, I am a certified private pilot. I own my own plane. I want to do this work within the right to repair criterion. I am able to do A through D.
Mhm.
But if I'm a private pilot licensed who owns his own plane, and I'm also a certified A&P, I can actually do items A through Z. I can do more because I'm certified and air quotes in here trained to do so.
Right.
Just curious. But then you said, okay, you can choose your own, mechanic to do the work. one thing I'm thinking of, and we touched on this in another episode as well, which is uh, non-certified parts coming in, sneaking into the system. All right, under this right to repair, are you then limited as a private aircraft owner of you can only purchase parts through these specified vendors? So you can't just go out and say, hey, I'm going to go buy stuff over here, or hey, I found this cheaper thing on the dark web, I'm going to order parts from there. No, per FAA, you're only allocated through these 10 different suppliers to acquire parts through.
Right. And I think that's one of the major rebuts for or rebuttals, sorry, rebuttals to the right to repair. Rebuts. Right. So that's one of the major arguments for it, because the ones who are advocating for right to repair is like, hey, I own it, I bought it, I should be able to fix it. Cool, right? And the argument for them having the right to do so is a lot of the manufacturers have some type of proprietary information that excludes you from knowing how to fix it. The cons to this, which is the argument against right to repair, is you're introducing the likelihood of counterfeit parts, right? And it's exactly as MVP alluded to, like, what's to stop you from you exercising your right to repair and you used an illegal part? And that's one of the major arguments. Like, what's to stop you? How are you going to know? Because technically, you have the right to choose however you want to fix this plane, as long as it's within the spec of this. And another argument against the right to repair is security. And for majority of parts, I can kind of sort of understand. You're starting to talk about how you got the parts, how you manufactured it, what sort of materials and processes you use to make it, stuff like that. I can understand like the reluctance to give that information out, especially if you say a business has some kind of economic advantage compared to your competitors. Giving that information out just pretty much took you out of the game. Um, that's one of the main arguments is like we don't want these people to monopolize these parts. I get it. But at the same time, if you're cornering a market and you're kicking ass, the last thing I want to do is give you the trade secrets, right? So I kind of understand it at that point. But the idea of security's sake, right, for something that's a little bit more sensitive, like say GPS related equipment or detect and avoid system, stuff that like requires a lot of smarts on the aircraft's side of the house, giving away that kind of information just may have some form of security risk. Like someone can figure out how to hack your plane or dick around with your transponder or something wild. You know what I mean? Like that's a little bit far fetched, but you know what I mean? Like that risk is kind of there when you think about it. So I kind of understand that to some extent on that side of the house. Um, I think the other case as well is, or at least argument sake, is the environment, like rinse and reusing parts. And we've talked about this in length in a couple of our episodes, like how people illegally procure parts or how some owners, they'll produce their own parts and say like, hey, I made this, even though they just totally took it from a trash can or a scrapyard or something like that. And some of these materials, like they have to be handled a certain way, right? Like if they have hexavalent chromium or some type of hazardous material composition in it, you just being able to mess around with it or unseal it, so to speak, you're exposing yourself and or everyone around you to whatever that thing's created. And a good example of this is I think prior to the 2000s, hexavalent chromium is a type of primer a lot of manufacturers use for like military aircraft and stuff. And for the longest, guys would just sand this thing, no respirators, no Tyvek suiting, no type of protective clothing, nothing. They'll just have this on the corner and just start going to town with a sanding wheel. Terrible idea, but they weren't fully aware of what that meant until some of them started having respiratory problems and possibly having some form of lung cancer. So it's one of those like lessons written in blood kind of thing. So I can understand why manufacturers find this as a bad idea to give people the right to repair. And MVP and I were talking about this before the show started. Is what's the line draw, right? And it's one thing when you let cars be able to have a right to repair, like they're able to modify it, have access to the computer chips or whatever software that makes it go fast or it makes it extend beyond its usable lifetime. But when you talk about airplanes, some of those life limits are there for a reason. You know, like it's not something we just like arbitrarily came up with and just said we wanted to die at this time. Uh, you
Right.
know,
Yeah, it's to change it before a failure can be incurred. You know, a car breaks down, you pull over to the side of the road. Well, let's use John Deere, right? They have a right to repair.
Mhm.
Tractor breaks down in the middle of the field. Well, it's just sitting there in the middle of the field. Now over that same field you know, flies MVP in his hoopty of an aircraft that he's fixed himself with duct tape and whatever else because he's just that great of a mechanic and that thing augers in and smacks the tractor in the middle of the field. You're not just pulling the plane over, I guess. Yeah, I understand you can dead stick it in and land in an open field. I got you, but worst case scenario, what we're saying here is the chance for loss of life is much higher uh, in aircraft failures in flight versus a tractor breaking down the field.
right. And as of right now that we know of, the current areas that have right to repair legislation or some type of law passed in, they have it limited to just like personal owned stuff that like doesn't connect to anything major or is not something that's sold to like the government or a school or some type of security firm, like say like video cameras or passcode locks. And understandably so, right? Because some of these things, they have some type of anti-theft, anti-hacking feature. So like the last thing you want is to someone to hack your phone and like legitimately hack your phone and do all kinds of crazy shit with it. Or like say you give like the debug codes for a security lock, and next thing you know, like this person can just walk around with a garage opener and just start picking through everyone's stuff like unfettered, And in terms of that, for an airplane, depending on what type of system it has installed or what kind of system it's operating on, if you have unfettered or close to unfettered access to all these different anti-jamming or anti-locking features, who knows what the shit you can do to this thing, right? Like this is how like introduction to unwanted agents in your shit, you know what I mean? And again, like who's to say like what's the risk likelihood and the risk consequence of this stuff auguring into the floor, or worse yet, like someone taking control of the plane while you're in it and just flying this bitch to somewhere in the middle of nowhere, strip it for its parts, and then resell it back to the mainstream. You know what I mean? So I could understand the
Uh,
risk.
you went really far with that one. I wasn't even thinking that deep with it.
Well, I mean, like
But
it's one of those like it snowballs, like what if this happens? Now, granted, what's the likelihood of this happening? Unknown at this time, but that's kind of like the same with cell phones. Who knew like 30 years ago that cell phones would be in the state it's in now? Like shit, like who needs a computer nowadays? You pretty much have like the entirety of human history in your pocket, or at
yeah,
least access to the entirety of human history in your pocket. Whether it's relevant or not, that's a different story. But
so adding more to this, to the right to repair. So I wonder what other restrictions beyond what you're actually allowed to repair on the aircraft. But let's say once I go and fix my aircraft, am I then restricted to only flying in certain airspaces, i.e., you know, not over urban dense populations, only flying over unincorporated areas? Or is it, hey, you're an aircraft, you build your flight plan, you fly anywhere and talk to ATC like anyone else? However, if you're under the right to repair, are you subject to a functional check flight? Okay, yeah, cool, you can fix your plane. However, we are going to put you through the ringer in testing what you've done just to ensure the work done was adequate. Yeah, we all do ops checks, a couple engine runs here and there, but I wonder if OEM will say, okay, all right, fine, we'll loosen the restrictions. You can fix this thing. Now, if we were to fix it as the OEM, here's the extensive checks we're going to put it through before we give it back to the customer. We're expecting you to do 80% at least of what we've done. We would do to ensure it's safer operation.
Right.
I wonder if those kind of restrictions will be imposed, or is it just, hey, fix it, fly it, and best of luck to you with a hearty salute.
Right. And I think that another big one, well, I think we kind of covered it already, is the safety and quality assurance of the repairs. I think that's where you were going, and that's kind of how I took it, right? Because like if you fixed it, fine, who cares, whatever. But to ensure that this thing doesn't plant itself in someone's yard, or worst case scenario, you high five another aircraft of yours, like now we're gonna make up that savings. We're gonna eat up that savings you just took by ensuring quality. You know what I mean?
Right. Or saying, hey, okay, fine, you fixed your plane, but now you also have to get a FCF, functional check flight certification. FAA says, oh, here's a little caveat you can add to your license to then be able to go and actually do the checkouts of the work you performed. So like you said, making up, stepping over $1 to pick up a dime kind of thing.
Right.
I wonder if that would be the case, or you say, hey, yeah, you did the work, but now you gotta go call so and so, and they gotta come over and do the check ride and everything else, and then they have to buy it off, and then once that's good, then you're cleared hot to fly again.
Right. Kind of like a over expensive smog check. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also think about like how OEMs write the manuals for military aircraft, right? So you build a fighter jet and you hand it over to the Air Force and you say, hey, as the manufacturers of this thing, you, the owner operator of this, are allowed to do all these things until you get to depot level, and then these things only we, the OEM, are allowed to do. We're reserving the right to do these main things. Now, those are options that those are maintenance tasks that you might only do once every other year, every 3 years, or annually, or something like that. So it's not every month you're calling the OEM out to fix or whatever. It's only during these depot level phase. So hey, as a depot, owner operator Air Force, you can break it all down for us. Once you get to this certain part, though, we, the OEM, step in and have to do this inspection, this component change, this ops check, whatever. We buy it off, and then from there, you're cleared to put everything back together and press on as you would.
Right. Or they might actually, I'm thinking they might play it off kind of like a home inspection. You know what I mean? Like, you did the work, fine, cool, but if you want to make this to code, right, like you can actually like resell this bitch or whatever the case, then you would have to like leave all the shit open so we can look through it, pay us the whole time we're doing it, and then once we're done, we stick you a bill as to all this stuff you have to fix, right? And of course, we're going to nitpick the shit out of it, right? Or we, as the OEM inspector, have to pick it. And then you got to slap it all back together on your own dime. And then we come back again to look it through to make sure that it doesn't, that it runs fine.
Then we come back in to verify the operational checks are what we are to what we said they would be,
right? Or like they might have played off like kind of like how automobiles do it, where like say like just simple service and lube stations where they have to have like a certain certification to say, hey, we can mess around with your car, kind of thing, right? I'm seeing the cons of this like exponentially being more than the pros. Like I can see this as a good thing. Like, okay, you as the owner, here's all the stuff, figure it out. But then, like, for everyone who has a license to use this, now they're going to say, okay, you have to have some kind of certification on top of the shit you already have to not only operate as a repair station or service center, but now you have to have these other certs in line so we can say you are licensed under this OEM to do X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? Kind of like that intermediate level maintenance before it heads to depot, where you have to call the OEMs to come mess with it. And I can see them expanding that to a certain degree. Like, okay, here's the manuals, but you can only do this, or they'll just say like, kind of like how warranty stickers are, like fix at your own risk, right? Like, if you fix it, cool, but don't expect. Well, once you've dicked with it, don't expect to give it back and get something out of it. You know, kind of like a warranty return or some shit. You know what I mean? Uh,
Right.
like
Or
void of
yeah, you say, okay, I'm running a certain type of oil brand in my Cessna because it's a little cheaper than what OEM recommends. But now with the right to repair, OEM says if you're going to fix it yourself, guess what you got to use?
Mhm.
The more expensive stuff.
Right. Yeah, I can see this becoming a more so of a con than a pro. But then again, this is me playing worst case scenario because we understand like some of the proprietary rights a lot of manufacturers have.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
well, we play worst case scenario because we watch it unfold all the time.
right.
And so hey, we loosen the restrictions on you. It's like passing a bill in government, right? Hey, look,
Mhm.
we're doing this thing for you. What's all this fine print? Don't look at that.
Just look at the
You're like,
arrow.
actually, this is worse than not having the loosened restrictions.
Right. And also like say for manufacturers, they're gonna find ways to cut it, right? Example, say like if like a car dealer or a car manufacturer like forgets to install something on a car, or they somehow like smoke this thing, like they drilled an extra hole in the engine and it flooded the whole base or some shit like that, right? Is it the manufacturer's fault to pick up the tab, or is it whoever bought it, right? Like, in say in the case of the government, like the government decided to buy like 150 freaking off-brand electric vehicles or some shit, and then the manufacturer forgot to put something, or they drilled an extra something onto the car, and then it fucking smokes itself. And usually the government or the purchaser will say, "No, you fucked it up. You fix it." But then here comes the manufacturer says, "Oh, no, 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 no. Here's this little clause in here that says anything over this amount, we don't have to fuck with." Right? Because even manufacturers have some kind of insurance or deductible that says if we broke it to a certain extent, now it's your tab. You know what I mean? So I can see manufacturers finding a way to weasel into that state. Like, well, you're the owner, you fucked it up, or we fucked it up, but you took ownership, you started to dick with it, now it's your fault, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, we messed it up, we made you aware, you still dicked with it, now it's your problem, right? I can see that happening to a certain extent. Um, I'm not really making a good case for this right to repair stuff. To some extent, I could understand why that'd be a cost effective, aka tractors and cars, but as again, for like aircraft, that's a little bit finicky because if it's like a Cessna or like one of those like private pilot kind of thing, I get it. Or like if it's for like a specific race when there's nobody else around, you're just in the middle of like a salt flat in the middle of nowhere, I get it. Like those drag racing competitions and stuff for aircraft, I get it. But like if you're flying over towns and stuff with this, yeah, not really. I can't really see that being a good thing, you know?
I see why heavy equipment manufacturers and such went that route. Um, Namely because it's probably more cost effective for the operator to fix their equipment to a certain degree. I'm sure there's some things he'd still call the OEM out for, but for the most part, you have your own hired mechanics that can do a lot of heavy machinery work, diesel motor work, and also let's face it, on construction sites, there's 25 pieces of equipment at any one time. Six of those things are broken down, and if you have, let's use Los Angeles, if you have 1,000 construction sites happening all over the city, there might not be, it just might be too much work saturation for the OEM to get to, even with multiple sites operating all the time. So say, hey, we can't keep up with the demand. Kind of a good problem to have. I guess through the OEM, you could say, I could go hire all these people to cover this extra work, but now I got a lot more overhead. I got to buy new trucks and equipment and such to go out and maintain these heavy machinery. Or I could do this right to repair. These guys can do the gen stuff, and then we'll just focus on the big ticket items, the high dollar items, which is your, typically your hydro system work, your diesel motor work, tracks, things of that nature. And you say, and if they mess it up, they're going to call me anyways to come fix it. So
Yeah.
I can see why they did that. Now for the aircraft side, I don't foresee that being the same scenario. I see it becoming it being done for ease of burden and trying to get people flying, right? Interest in aviation, keeping the private pilots, everybody up there doing what they want to do, having fun. And I think the initial thought is a lessening of cost to the owner operator of the aircraft. But I bet those restrictions are pretty tight. I bet you, if I'm a betting man, I bet you those right to repair restrictions aren't as loose as we're thinking they're going to be.
Right. I
I
agree.
just don't foresee it. If you have to be certified to work on, let's be here in the States, right, on N numbered aircraft, I just don't see them saying, anybody who has a fat wallet who can purchase an aircraft can go fix it. I just, we all know that we operate under tight tolerance and restrictions as designated by the manufacturer, which is why we are certified to do what we do and go through the training that we do and work, the scheduled inspection and scheduled maintenance intervals that we do, is because the risk is just so much higher than any ground-based transportation system.
I fully agree. And I'm also playing devil's advocate here as far as the cons are concerned. Like, if they do allow for rights to repair, like, what's that plus or minus from the certified mechanics currently out in the field? You know what I mean? Like, does that lessen their job? Does that give them more stuff that they have to do or attain or maintain or whatever? Like, what's that mean for the mechanic? And I can see a lot of cascading effects once this comes into play, if and when it does. Right. Key points are like the anti-jamming, anti-locking, anti-hacking, all kinds of other security features. The big one, of course, is going to be safety. Right. Like, what's that mean quality assurance wise if we put that into the hands of the owner of what they are allowed to do and what they can do? Mainly from the mechanic standpoint, like, if the owner can do X, Y, and Z, what's the incentive for them to hire mechanics, right? Or even have mechanics in the field, right? So I'm seeing a lot of negatives already just from that sake. I could be way off base in this, just prefacing that. Good, but I can see it as an incentive to, in a sense, try to phase out the mechanics that are on the road now. Now, I could be 100% wrong. It could just be, it actually could plus up the need for more mechanics because now, they've restricted certain maintenance like more thoroughly from the OEMs to the mechanic side of the house, maybe. But as of right now, you know what I mean? Like, we're already experiencing a shortage gap, which we're probably not going to address for the next 6 or 7 years, so to speak, right? So until they have some kind of heavy incentivized plan for people to be certified mechanics, I just see this. I see this kind of like as a cop out to kind of cut the maintainer out of the mix. You know what I mean? Just like, well, there's not that many walking around, so the ones that are around, they have to fly in, or they take a while. And it's gonna cost me more, or whatever the case may be. So why don't I just fix what I can by myself, right? And I think that in the long run, it's going to kind of give the mechanics some kind of sustainability because they know that certain owners are not that mechanically inclined. So let's be real, they're not that mechanically inclined. They'll just do some kind of ghetto rig fix to keep it going, and they'll just putter around until it pretty much rides till it dies. And then now you are as a mechanic, you just see all these repairs like, what the shit is this? I mean, they do that. We see that now. We see a couple of planes come in and we look at what the owners were able to fix, or whoever they said that was a mechanic who knew how to fix it. And they're like, just this hodgepodge of craziness going on. Like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, yeah, this is going to cost you a whole lot extra because you did all this stuff and you totally weren't supposed to. Like, I've seen some crazy shit, man. Like, I've seen this one this one part towards the engine where it was like, picture like someone duct taping a door, but instead of duct tape, they just used safety wire, like just over safety wire the fuck out of this thing. Like, that's not cool. Like, how did you even get this to fly? Much less freaking, how did you continue to fly before you brought it here? You know what I mean? And then when I'm wondering along the lines of the mechanic themselves, if they were to inspect these right to repair parts, if they're legally obligated to flag you for some shit, you know? Like, what am I allowed to say? Yo, you fucked up, or whatever. It's your plane, it's your problem, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, when does the buck get passed off of me because the owner did it? You know? Um, I'm spooling a whole lot of negatives here. I mean, but then again, you know, this is definitely a good debate. Like, what are you, the owner? You bought it, cool, but what are you allowed to do with it? I mean, there's rules now that tells you what you should and shouldn't do. But if we open that up for debate, like, what should we allow you to do? I think that's a dangerous question already. But of course, the owner's going to say, I want everything open and honest with me, and I want it to be free, and I want it to be cost me next to nothing. I got it.
Great. We all want that. I want to go to the grocery store and not spend $200 for apples and a bag of chips. You know what I mean?
No shit. No shit.
I get it.
What can I say, man? Like, scarcity of resources, man.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I really don't know what to think, honestly. I think they might open it up to flight control, some flight control rigging in some of the older aircraft. I think they might allow you to do, you know, certain cockpit upgrades, you know, glass cockpit upgrades. You know, because some of the companies out there now are making kits, right? So they send you the whole kit, wiring loom and everything, and say, all right, well, here's the instructions, and it comes with everything, and it tells me what I need to disconnect, remove, and where I need to route this new, you know, wire loom, and then plug it into the back of the console, and you know, the glass console slides right in. You know, I can see some of that stuff. I don't foresee structural repairs. You know, I don't see that. Unless you maybe are a certified A&P who also owns their own aircraft, but I don't know if you're not that, if you'd be allowed to do structural.
Right.
And you know, here's the other side of the argument. You say, well, some of the maintenance manuals that we've dealt with, I mean, are written to a third grade level. You know, you could give as long as your child can read, they can go out there and read and understand how to do work on that aircraft. I get it. So you could say, you know, as long as the instruction's detailed enough, there shouldn't be any issue.
Yeah.
I think it's as you're doing that work, you know, you kind of do, what do they call it? The 5% rule. As you're working in an area, you're also looking 5% beyond the areas you're working in, just for looking for anything out of the norm.
Yeah. Yep.
You know,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I can see this being like a slippery slope kind of scenario. You know what I mean? And now, as far as like giving access to manuals, to repair procedures, to certain tools, and you know, or a list of authorized part dealers and stuff, 100%. You know what I mean? That should, if in terms of safety, that should totally be a thing. Especially if you're a licensed repair station or a certified A&P mechanic, you should 100% have access to those materials. At least, you know, to an extent. I mean, if you want to put a bill to this, I mean, just, I don't know, say something like you have to attend a biannual conference or some shit. You know what I mean? Like, let's not make this off the wall expensive. You know, that kind of goes back to like, should manual subscriptions be a safety issue. I 100% agree that it should, or it shouldn't be closed access. But as far as allowing the owner to do more than preventative maintenance on the plane, that's wish-washy, man. At best, like I'm, I don't have enough smarts or study material to make a decision on that, or to at least form a solid opinion. Other than like, I can see a way that yes, they'll probably open it up to you to a certain extent, as MVP says, but they'll find a way to get that dollar back. You know what I mean? One way or another, whether it be from the OEMs themselves or for the people that are doing the inspection after you've done the repair or whatever the case may be. Um, it could also be like, say, if the A&P did it, now they have to call in some outside inspector to verify that it works and some shit like that. I can see that happening. Now, what's the likelihood? Don't know. But again, like I think as far as a right to repair, I mean, cars, like as MVP and I said, like cars and cell phones and shit, whatever, right? Because if your cell phone explodes, just buy another one. I mean, $1,000 down the drain, whatever. But the likelihood of your cell phone grenading and killing everybody inside of inside of a 10-foot radius is significantly lower than if someone did a private repair on a plane and this thing augers itself into a field somewhere, possibly, someone else's house or whatever. So, I mean, we already see it already with commercial airliners and big name aircraft, like just how much just like having access to manufacturer spec can really play the odds, as far as like, is this repair good? Was there any deviations to this when it came out of the factory? Stuff like that. I mean,
well, that's a good point. I mean, look at some of the airlines that have jettisoned doors.
Yeah,
they weren't the OEM, and does that door plug now get a revamp on the inspection roster, or is it something that OEM now has to come out and verify on each of that particular make and model aircraft at every 6 months or something, whatever the interval is, or is it every 90 days until enough of a positive trend is noticed where there's no negative wear and tear or out of tolerances witnessed, and then from there the inspection instead of every 90 days, it's every 180. All right, enough positive trends. Now we move to every 365.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see this opening up for aircraft like up to a certain age. You know what I mean? Like if it was made in the 50s or the 70s, I mean, your chances are, for all we know, this is still running on like carburetors and like pneumatic accumulators and shit. You know what I mean? Like real rudimentary rigging, so to speak, Well, as far as like aircraft is concerned, it's rudimentary. Now, I'm not saying that they're not complicated or anything like that, but compared to today's aircraft where they basically have feelings and freaking would have their own social media accounts if they were any smarter kind of shit, I for sure say that if they're made beyond a certain point, you should not even remotely fuck with this thing. But I could be wrong. And again, like how MVP and I said, like we can see this stepping over a dollar to pick up a dime kind of scenario. Like it's going to cost you more to do it than it is to just go the route that currently exists. We could be wrong though. I could be 100% wrong. It could actually make better work for us. It could open up more doors. At this point in time, I don't think there's enough info to argue for it as far as aircraft is concerned. For automobiles and tractors and stuff, whatevs, man. Like as long as this thing doesn't like overheat or explode on the road, I think you're fine. Right. Worst case scenario, you blow out your O2 sensor and your check engine light runs until the bulb burns out. I've seen people do that all the time. Like what's the phrase? Like I know how my car runs, kind of thing.
No low ballers. I know what I got.
Like new, like dude, this is 20 years old. Like new, bro.
Ran when parked. It was parked in 1935. Oh, okay, great. You know,
Yeah, it's or like what's one of those shows where they rescue salvage vehicles? Like it's just been sitting outside next to a barn for like 20 years. It's in the rain, in the snow, all rusted to shit, and they still say like they want 20 grand for it or something like that.
you know what
Like,
that reminds me of is that show Airplane Repo, and
yeah,
this guy would go to the airports and he'd essentially repo the planes like they would a car. He just jumps in and takes off flying it. I'm like, I don't know how that works. As the same as a car, right? Like,
yeah,
don't you have to have a flight plan? And but then some of the aircraft, what I'm getting at is some of the aircraft they're getting in are hoopties. I'm like, man, you're just going to jump in that thing, not knowing the status of the aircraft or who did what to it, and you're just going to take off and fly. Like, haha, I showed them, I got this plane back. They quit paying for it. It's like, yeah, they quit paying for it because they didn't have money. They didn't have money to pay for it. They definitely don't have it to fix it.
right.
Oh, nice, you know.
Yeah, like yeah, that's bold move, Cotton. Let's see how that works out for him. Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a bit debate. We're 100% open for this discussion because I like to hear the arguments for it because as of right now we're seeing a whole lot of against, and it's majority it's because of safety. And if it's a mechanic working on it, kudos. I just say you would have to have like some real good knowledge on these planes that you're messing around with, for you to be able to do those. Now, granted, there's a lot of like general practices that apply to pretty much any aircraft, and some of these manuals are outdated to shit anyway, so it's not like you have updated information or information that's not obsolete for you to mess around with, so you kind of like best guess. But I feel that applies only to a certain age, you know what I mean? Like I'm sure there's some rule that after a certain point, like don't even think about putting this thing on the runway kind of shit. Besides like as a showpiece kind of thing, Like just flashing the vent but never actually driving it kind of thing. Any final thoughts on any of this, Mr. VP?
Well, it'll be curious to see what the legislation plays out as. I think the FAA will probably put out some sort of overarching guidance as to what can be done, but that'll drive the OEM to rewrite manuals with specific right to repair sections in them. I think, or the 43, 13 or whatever will be modified to include those details. But I think if the 4313 is modified to include those details, it's not going to be as open and unrestricted as many are hoping for. Now, if it's an overarching guidance that says, hey, right to repair is good to go as long as OEM dictates these certain restrictions, and then the OEM comes forth and rewrites manuals and such, I think it'll be more open to do more things for the owner operators.
I agree.
So
I agree.
Just depending on what the FAA is going to do at this point.
Right. I totally agree with you. But hey, what do you guys think? Like, is the right to repair something that should be available to aircraft? And then what sort of restrictions or limitations should be imposed if this does get pushed through? What does this mean for aircraft mechanics? Like, what can we do? What can we not do? Right? Are we slowly seeing a phase out here, or what's your best case, worst case scenario kind of thing? Let us know in the comments, our social medias, our email, our website, whichever is the easiest way for you to contact us. The absolute best way to have conversations like this, which we have all the time, is through our Discord channel via our Patreon. Again, like this kind of question, this discussion point was posed by a Patreon, and this is definitely spinning our wheels. I'm like, we kind of voiced it already with some of the cons we can have, but hey, if there's pros to this, please by all means tell us. On that,
and we're not saying. Hope nobody's thinking that we're being negative Nancy's over here. It's just that in our career we've seen that typically nothing's free.
yes,
and would say, hey, we're going to make things less restrictive on one end, but it's going to make up for it somewhere else. And that's just the nature of the beast. You know, history has told us anything. Hey, the FAA is not just going to go, all right, you know, free for all, fix anything and everything you want. Holy crap. Because the minute there's several fatalities in a row, boom, everything's grounded. And that right to repair gets revoked quickly.
Yes.
So it's just the reality of the situation. Again, not trying to be negative Nancy's. We do recognize the positives. I'm sure we didn't capture all the positives, but it's just not going to be as free and clear as many are hoping.
I agree. Fully agree. But again, let us know. Tell us your discussion points. On that note, we thank you all again for listening, and we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
We would like to take this time to thank our patrons for supporting our show and allowing us to make episodes, maintain our gear, and create merch for all of our listeners. With special thanks to Erica Lamont, Chris Hawkins, Eric Shaw, Dan Schubert, Ryan Frushauer, Kyle Keir, Mike Sherwood, Caleb Stockhill, and Jennifer Brofer. Thank you all so much for your support and patronage. If you like our show, please support us on Patreon. You'll receive awesome perks like access to our private Discord, discounts and early access to our merch, first glimpse of our comics and other projects, and so much more. You can further support us and show off your prowess as an aircraft specialist by visiting our shop at cancelformaintenance.com. If you like classy or rugged watches, visit our affiliate Rockwell Time at rockwelltime.com. Use the code CX, the number 4MX to save 10% off your total order. If you have suggestions for the show or you'd like to be a guest on the show, send us a line on our contact us section at cancelformaintenance.com, and we'll do what we can to get both your ideas and yourself on the show. Please support us on social media like Facebook at Cancel for Maintenance, Instagram at CANX for Maintenance Podcast, or Twitter at CXMX Podcast. Please check out our new comic series on the Tapas app. Like, share, subscribe, and comment on our comics. Let us know what you think. Thank you all so much for your support and listenership, and we will catch you all next time.